Hello and welcome back to another nail video. For today's video, I'm already prepped and my tips have been applied, and I'm just starting by applying a thin layer of dehydrator to each nail. And I'm actually going to be doing a set of polygel nails in today's video. And for some reason, I forgot to record me applying a thin layer of primer, but I actually applied a thin layer of primer before I apply a thin coat of this Beetles base coat. Now, it's extremely important when you're doing polygel nails to apply a thin layer of base coat because the gel sticks to the gel. And of course, I try to make sure I get a nice and even coat. And then I'm going to cure these nails for about 60 seconds. And today I'm using Goya Polygel in the color light pink. And I just apply a small bead of the polygel to each nail. Then I use my polygel brush, and I'm using some 70% alcohol as my slip solution. And I just pat that product down. I try to get it as flat as possible. And if you notice, I am pushing the product back towards the cuticle area. So I don't put the product directly on the cuticle area because then it could potentially flood. So I always push the product back towards the cuticle area. And then I move the product down towards the tip of the nail. Again, with my application, I make sure that I clean up any of the product that's left on the skin because I don't want to cure it on the skin. And then I try to make sure that the layer of polygel is as even as possible. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the excess product from the tip of the nail. And again, I use my brush to flatten the product out and push it back towards the cuticle area. I do like to work in sections just to try to keep the product as even as possible. One thing I've learned while working with polygel, it's better to add layers and to make those layers nice and thin. The product is very easy to build upon and get the thickness or the structure that you need. So I pretty much just repeat these steps on all the nails, pushing that product back towards the cuticle area. Again, trying to make sure that I'm removing any excess product from off of my skin because I don't want it to cure on my skin. Try to work in sections to make sure that the product is nice and even and that it's a very thin layer. And then I go ahead and remove that excess product. So I'll just let you all watch as I continue. Once I'm done with my pinky finger, Then I'm going to go ahead and cure this hand for about 60 seconds before I begin on my next layer. And these are how the nails look after they've cured in the nail lamp for about 60 seconds. I'll go ahead and apply a small bead of the polygel to each nail again in the center of the nail. Then I'll go ahead and push that product back towards the cuticle area. I like for my nails to be natural looking, so I try to get the cuticle area as flush as possible. You don't really need too much product in the cuticle area. And then again, I use my brush and my slip solution to go ahead and work that product down towards the tip of the nail. Another thing that I've learned when doing polygel nails, you don't have to saturate your brush too much with the alcohol or the slip solution. If you do, you'll notice that the product will kind of expand, and you don't want that to happen. That'll leave the layer spotchy. So you don't need too much slip solution. It's better to have a drier brush. That way you can really work that product down towards the tip of the nail. And after I'm done with my pinky, I'll go ahead and cure these nails for about 60 seconds before moving on to my thumb, because I don't want to mess up any of the hard work that I've done so far. And for my thumb, I pretty much repeat the same steps, but you did notice that I actually applied a little more product just because the thumb is a little bigger than the rest of my nails. And I wanted to make sure that I got a nice coverage and a nice even layer. So I did use a little more product. And again, I just use my brush to pat the product down. I'm doing very gentle, smooth motions, not applying too much pressure because I don't want to remove too much product. I just want to make sure that it's a nice and even layer. And then, of course, what I do to one hand, I have to do to the other. So now I'll be doing my right hand using my left hand. And if you can imagine, this was a very hard process, but I managed to get it done. And I'm repeating the same steps as before, using my brush to push that product back towards the cuticle area. Nice soft strokes. And of course, trying to make sure that I'm doing a nice, thin, and even layer on all of the fingers. If I was thinking, I would have laid my hand down on something just so that I was a little more sturdy and I didn't have to like juggle holding my hand still while it's in the air. But you live and you learn. So next time I'll definitely make sure I have like a candle topper, which is what I normally use to just place my hand down so that it's nice and sturdy. But again, I'm just using my brush to push that product back, tapping it in slow, gentle motions, trying to make sure that it's as even and as flat as possible. And of course, I'm going to clean up around the cuticle area because I don't want any of the product to cure to my skin. And once I'm done with my pinky, I'll go ahead and cure these nails for 60 seconds. And then off camera, I applied another thin layer to each nail. And then I also cured that layer for 60 seconds as well. And then I'll use some alcohol and a napkin, and I just remove the tacky, sticky layer from each nail. Next, as you see now, I'm using my 80/80 grit nail file to go ahead and file and shape these nails. One thing I've learned with polygel nails is that it's better to use a hand file and a sanding band when it comes to the shaping. And that's just my opinion. To me, it just gives the best shape, the more crisp look. And I'm just filing and shaping the sides, making sure I'm getting a nice smooth layer on the top of the nails. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for all of the nails. And then I'm using my sanding band and my e-file, and I'm making sure to go around the cuticle area because again, I want it to be as flush as possible, as well as the top of the nail, just to make sure that it's nice and thin and a nice and even layer. And you'll also notice that I do go underneath the nail just to remove any excess product that may have cured underneath the nail, because that can throw your shape off as well. And I go ahead and do this for all of the nails. Again, making sure that I get nice and close to the cuticle area so it can be as flush as possible. And that helps with having a natural, realistic nail. Okay, and these are how the nails turned out after they've been shaped and filed. So cute. Now it's time for my favorite part. And again, I'm using Beetle's base coat. And I'm just going to apply a very thin layer of base coat to each nail, because I will be doing some nail art today. It's just important whenever you're using gel polishes to apply a base coat, because that makes your layer come out just nice and smooth. And then once I'm done applying a thin layer of base coat, I'll go ahead and cure these nails for about 60 seconds before I begin my design. And for today's design, I'm using Melody Susie gel polish in the color P10. And it's this really pretty pastel yellow color. And I apply a thin layer of this gel polish and to my ring finger. And then I'm going to go ahead and cure this for about 60 seconds. And then I applied another thin layer off camera. And for my first finger, I am using that same pastel yellow gel polish to create a French tip. And I'm using my Melody Susie liner brush. And I'm just creating the outline for the French tip before I go ahead and fill it in. And I'm also using that same yellow pastel color from Melody Susie to draw another French tip on my pinky finger. And again, I'm using my liner brush from Melody Susie just to create a nice outline for myself before I go ahead and fill in the French tip. And once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and cure those nails. And then I apply another layer off camera and cure that as well. And for my middle finger, I'm using this really pretty pink color by Madame Glam. And again, I'm applying a very thin layer. And then I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I'm actually also applying it to my thumb. I forgot that I used the same color on my thumb as well. This set is kind of old, you all, so bear with me. I'm a little behind when it comes to my nail videos, but don't you worry, I am dedicated and committed to catching up. So you'll actually be seeing a lot more nail videos from me coming soon. So again, I apply the thin layer, then I go ahead and cure for 60 seconds, and then I apply another layer off camera and cure for 60 seconds as well. Next, I'm using Macart nail glue and just an old liner brush. And I'm taking some of the nail glue and applying it on the liner brush to give me this 3D design, this 3D effect that's been really popular lately. I actually love it. I think it's really cute and elegant, and it just brings dimension and texture to the nails. So I really, really like it. I'm applying the design to my first finger and my pinky finger right on top of my French tip. And then I cure it pretty much after I complete 2 lines because this nail glue runs a little bit. So you want to make sure that you cure to lock in your design in place. So I'll go ahead and cure for about 30 seconds. And then I'm using my dotting tool and Snow White gel polish by Melody Susie. And I'm just using the dotting tool to go around a circle. And then I'm using a very thin liner brush. I actually think I had to cut this brush to make it even more thinner. And I'm just using it to help me create a really pretty flower on top of this yellow pastel color. And I actually love how this flower came out. It's super cute. And last but not least, for my middle finger, I created this milky white color by mixing the Melody Susie Snow White and some top coat. And I just applied a thin layer to my middle finger, and I did not cure that nail yet. Then I used my dotting tool and I added a little top coat to the dotting tool, and I just made dots on top of my middle finger to create this bubble like effect. And it turned out so cute. And these are how the nails turned out. Super cute. I love them. Really simple yet pretty summer